The Warramai Aboriginal Co-op has set up the 40-hectare market garden following a state government land grant. The co-op also received a $130,000 CEP grant, which has been used to build a shed, buy a tractor and other materials. Today's flag raising was made by the oldest member of the co-op, Alec Russell. It was a timely ceremony, falling on the last day of National Aborigines Week. The Department of Agriculture has advised that vine fruits and vegetables should be grown first to assess the crop potential of the land. The market garden is expected to be self-sufficient and producing its first harvests early next year.
It was a first for many things at the day's Vietnam Legion Remembrance Day ceremony. A nurse headed the march for the first time, in recognition of the work that 43 local nurses did in evacuating the maimed and limbless from the horror of the Vietnam War. At the new Wall of Remembrance in Civic Park, tributes and wreaths were laid in honour of those killed in action during the war and those who died on their return. HMAS Dubbo is here especially for the occasion, and her commanding officer and crew joined the ceremony, along with infantrymen from Singleton Army Base and representatives from the RAF base at Williamtown. Many of the next of kin of those killed in action also took part in today's solemn remembrance. A special plaque on the commemorative stone has been placed to highlight Australia's involvement in the controversial Southeast Asian conflict.
It was perfect weather for the running of the 21-kilometre event. Starting at Lake Macquarie Athletic Park, the 140 competitors ran through Warners Bay, Eleebana and Valentine. For most of the race, Brian Morgan and Mike Beastie ran neck and neck, but in the closing stages, Morgan skipped away to win in 1 hour, 10 minutes and 26 seconds, 43 seconds ahead of Beastie. First home in the ladies section was Judith Fletcher. Many of the half-marathon competitors have entered the Super Enduro, which means they must also compete in a 10-kilometre canoe and 80-kilometre bike race next weekend and a triathlon on September 27th. Meanwhile, at Raymond Terrace, the second round of the dragboat season was raced today. 20 of the nation's fastest dragboats took part, as well as plenty of speedboats circuit racing. Fastest dragboat today was Pub Wai, driven by Tony Jowett. He wound his machine up to 280 kilometres an hour, well short of the Australian record he set last month at Windsor of 296 kilometres an hour.
The two men were crossing the sandbar into the channel at Lobster Beach in the Booty National Park when their 5-metre runabout overturned. A passing fishing trawler went to the men's assistance and secured the capsized boat until the water police arrived from Broken Bay. The rescue helicopter transported one of the men unconscious to the Woy Woy Hospital, but he was dead on arrival. Meantime, at Legs Camp on the Mile Lakes near Bulladila, a Lemon Tree Passage man suffered first and second-degree burns to his hands, face and head when this houseboat exploded and caught fire yesterday. Wayne Agnew and a companion, Alan Daly from Wollongong, went to the stern of the $20,000 vessel to investigate a strong smell of petrol. It's believed a spark from the boat's battery ignited fuel and the craft burst into flames. Daly was thrown into the water and escaped serious injury, but Agnew caught the full force of the explosion. He was taken to the Royal Newcastle Hospital before being transferred to the burns unit of Sydney's Royal North Shore Hospital, where he's now in a stable condition. The man was with friends off the southern end of Bar Beach when he slid from his surfboard into the water to cool off. He surfaced unconscious, and his companions immediately began giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. One of the surfers paddled to shore for help. On the beach, it was first thought there'd been a shark attack, and the alarm was sounded. but that was soon discounted and rescue personnel were alerted. Peter Withers from the Dixon Park Club assisted in the rescue.
And I was one of the young blokes that I know that surfs up here. He was semi-conscious and he was bleeding from the mouth. He'd either swallowed his tongue or had some sort of fit. But we sort of had a bit of trouble getting him in because he was so far out. There was a bit of a rip out there, and we put him on the board, and all the blokes that were surfing helped me support him on the board, and we kept him with a nice open airway, and we tried to I had to keep putting a few vests in, and we kept him on the board and got him where the waves were breaking, and just supported him until we got him to shore. Then the ambulance fellas took over, the paramedics took over then.
On the beach, ambulance officers and a doctor worked to revive the man. He was then loaded onto the rescue helicopter and flown to the Royal Newcastle Hospital. He was conscious and talking to hospital staff on arrival. The man's companions, rescuers and the emergency team have been praised for their quick work. Meantime, the rescue helicopter was called out this afternoon to transport a 63-year-old man from Lemon Tree Passage to the Royal. The man was cleaning a barbecue at his home when he threw petrol onto the ashes of the fire. It ignited and he suffered burns to his hands and right leg.
Dallas Bray has been Newcastle's artist in residence since May this year. As is the tradition, he lives in the Shepherd's Hill Cottage, which occupies one of the most stunning locations in the city. Yesterday, Dallas held an open day to enable members of the public to view his paintings. His work has a strong style that shows a definite Sydney Nolan influence. He says the period in residency has been invaluable to his work.
It gives me the time and the resources to be able to work, to do what work I'd like to do without those hindrances of working constantly. Like, you need a lot of time to paint, and when you're scraping a living through part-time jobs, running to this job and to that job, there's no real time to concentrate.
Stylistically, his paintings are moving in a number of diverse directions, ranging from his cutouts to landscapes that reflect his current environment. Brisbane artist Max Hurley describes himself as a fantastic realist. That may be so, but perhaps more he's a satirist who manages to pull out human faults and exaggerate them. Many of his paintings are inspired by dreams, ideas and music. Some of his most recent works show an Eastern influence inspired by a recent trip to Nepal. One painting, called Turning Japanese, is a strong comment on Japanese influence on Queensland. Others, such as When the Parade Passes, seem almost a comment on human nature in general, with one woman who has completely trapped a man and another woman being carried through life supported by a man. As a strong contrast, potter Terry Good is also exhibiting at the Morpeth Gallery. His works are primarily functional objects, but many show extraordinary grace and harmony. The violence began at the end of the under-17 grand final when minor premiers Cardiff had been beaten by Port Stephens. As the field umpires were leaving the ground, it's alleged a spectator attacked them and then singled out senior umpire John McCormack. Only minutes before, it's alleged a young female spectator had also attacked McCormack. Umpire spokesman Gavin Williamson says Cardiff under-17 coach Jim Sharp will be reported in a letter of complaint for allegedly sparking off both incidents after he had abused field umpire Michael Hoare. Meanwhile, during the A-grade trophy presentation, John Tompkinson of Nelson Bay Club poured beer over league president Don Geddes. Tompkinson was suspended until 1989 last month for playing while under suspension. Tompkinson's son Jamie also joined the controversy. Mr Geddes says the Nelson Bay club was embarrassed and apologetic over the incident. Both Tompkinsons will now appear before the Newcastle Australian Football Board. Umpires will also demand from the Newcastle League police protection at next year's grand final, or they will not officiate.
Over the next 2 days, the Newcastle Cup Carnival takes centre stage on the Australian racing scene. Most of the country's top horseflesh, trainers and jockeys have already begun arriving for the carnival. Tomorrow's main event is the NBN Cameron Handicap over 1,400 metres. The race carries $60,000 in prize money and is the principal sprint race on the Newcastle Jockey Club calendar. NBN racing expert Gary Harley says amongst the good quality field is 6 or 7 strong chances.
Well, I'm going for one with a lightweight appreciation. I spoke about wide barriers where it is hard to win from a wide alley. She's drawn out a bit. She'll probably come in to start about 12 or 13, but I do think that she has the class to win. I think she can take up a good position early, especially with Ron Quinton in the saddle. She's a 4-year-old mare, nicely weighted with 50.5, and I think she'll be very hard to beat. The top weight Full Page, well, he'll probably start from about barrier 10 with the emergencies not obtaining a run. He's got a good chance. He's been set for the Epsom handicap, and if he's to run well in that, he should figure in the finish here. Jim Cassidy will be on him, and the big long straight will suit him. And for third, I put in True Reason. I spoke to Malcolm Johnson on Thursday. He's going to ride him. He's very, very confident. It's his third run back from a spell. He should be cherry ripe, and when he's in form, he's a very, very smart racehorse.
Conditions were made to order for today's racing. It was a perfect spring day. The track was at its best. All the ingredients for good racing and a big crowd. More than 8,000 rolled up, including personalities Kerry-Ann Kennelly and Tim Webster from Good Morning Australia, former Wallaby Mark Ella, local basketball stars Wayne McDaniel and Buster Matheny, and racing identity Ken Callender, who says he wouldn't miss a Newcastle Cup Carnival.
Well, I've been coming to Newcastle for over 20 years. I think Royal Rake won the first cup I covered here at Newcastle. I've always loved the track. I think it's the equal to any racing surface in Australia. Certainly the best wet weather track, but thankfully we've got the sunshine, so we haven't got to worry about that. It's a super track and good fields to make it good racing.
Of course, no big race day is complete without the fashions, and this year was no exception, with racegoers dressed to a T.
The ladies are looking extremely elegant, the fashions are very feminine, and I'm seeing a lot of hats, and I think that's very special. It's something nice when you see hats at the racecourse.
Anything particularly special this year that wasn't here last year?
Nothing particularly special. I think what I found, the garments are much more feminine than they have been. Last year we saw a lot of very straight, austere clothes. This year it's very soft and feminine flowing. It's wonderful.
A lot of black and white as well.
Yes, black and white seems to be very, very popular for spring this year.
Now to the NBN Cameron Handicap, in which Full Page started favourite. As the horses entered the straight, it was anyone's race.
Travelling towards the turn in this year's NBN Cameron Handicap, and Space Power first to swing. Fleet Invader moving up to join it, just behind them True Reason. Kiwi Kong down the outside, Riverfront, and then came down the outside by Tierra Wrist. The next one was Crossroads from Molly, and further back in the field, Raff and Prince. They've got about 250 to go, and True Reason tackling over on the inside. Fleet Invader, Hader Prince coming home well, and here's the favourite, Full Page. Full Page running up to join True Reason. It's going the better, Full Page. Full Page wins the Cameron in a great finish. Full Page has won from True Reason and Hader Prince.
The main event of the two-day carnival will be raced tomorrow, the $125,000 Winfield Gold Cup over 2,300 metres. NBN racing expert Gary Harley believes Ostensible will win.
I spoke to Malcolm Johnson today. He's very, very confident, and even though he's drawn wide, I think he has the potential to win. For second I've put in Edition Bay, beautifully weighted. Ron Quinton, a great jockey aboard. He'll run the distance right out. I think he'll be hard to beat. And Kenzai, despite his 56 kilos, has a great chance. But I have a lot of respect for the Larry Pickering trained Rising Fear. He's the biggest tip here at Broadmeadow today. Everyone wants to tip him. I spoke to his jockey Peter Cook through the day. Peter said he was most unlucky the other day and he thinks he'll run a great race now. He was 10-1 before he raced on Saturday. Rising Fear. He'll probably start close enough to favourite tomorrow.
Willits was aboard the maiden Miss Opulent. Having her third start, she'd begun well and was racing just off the pace on the rail when she appeared to veer out of the crossing that leads onto the training tracks inside the course proper. The filly is trained on the track and crashed heavily to the turf, leaving Willits prone until ambulancemen arrived. Apart from a loss of skin, Miss Opulent was none the worse for wear, but Jeff Murphy's #1 stable jockey was taken to hospital, concussed and with suspected fractures in both wrists. That means he will now miss the Rich Spring Racing Carnival. The winning ride later on Happy View in race 4 was also missed by Willits, that mount taken by Darren Gauchi.
It was only last night that miners began their return to work after the national strike in the coal industry. But already there are strong indications that the industry in the Hunter Valley is heading for a showdown. Newcastle Wallsend, a fully owned subsidiary of Pico Wallsend, last night served workers at 3 of its mines with a list of 45 work practice changes. Workers at both the Ellalong and Pelton collieries have rejected the changes and walked off the job. Miners are still working at the Gretley mine because many of the changes do not affect these workers. Newcastle Wallsend's General Manager Argo Carew insists that the changes are needed. He says Robe River was a success story and hopes that a similar result can be achieved in the Hunter, but without as much bloodshed.
Certainly, if we could succeed as well as Robe has, we'd be very pleased with the result. I have no doubt that if we could make the same gains here, we'd be totally viable and our employees would have no worries about the security of their jobs.
Mr. Carew says companies can't afford to sit by any longer.
The industry and Australia indeed have known for months, many months, that there are problems in the coal industry. People have made speeches and shied away from the real problems. And in the meantime, the industry has just kept on bleeding. We, as one company, will not.
At the Warkworth mine, workers were confronted with a list of changes to work practices when they turned up to work last night. They refused to accept them and have taken over the crib room.
This morning's fire completely destroyed the Larkin family home in George Street. Robert and Diane Larkin and their 2 children, Andrew 3 and Elizabeth 2, were all away at the time. And Mr. Larkin says the first he knew of the blaze was when he received a phone call at work.
Oh, it was unbelievable, but it first takes a little while to sink in.
The Larkins have lived in their weatherboard Lake Macquarie home for the past 3 years, and although they have building insurance, the contents were not insured. Mr. Larkin says he'll simply have to start all over again. The fire was attended by the Cardiff, Terralba and Bullaroo fire brigades.
And the house was very heavily involved in fire in the rear section when Terralba arrived, and the rest of the house was very heavily smoke laden.
Has the cause of the fire been determined?
Not exactly, but we leaned towards electrical. It was at the rear of the meter box, so it looks a bit that way.
In tonight's news at 6, we'll look at the NIB Newcastle Falcons and their season in the recently completed National Basketball League. We'll look at the controversy as well as the record-breaking performances.
For all the news, join us tonight at 6.
Ronald George Orchard, a 49-year-old miner from Cessnock, was flanked by police as he was led into Cessnock local court today. He faced charges of malicious wounding and intending to inflict grievous bodily harm. Police prosecutor Sergeant Philip Lloyd told the court that Orchard had been drinking at a club on Sunday night. 18-year-old Troy Anthony Whitfield was also drinking there. Police allege Orchard picked up a beer glass and hit Troy on the face, breaking the glass in the process. They say Orchard then thrust the broken glass into Troy's neck, causing serious injury. Part of his jugular vein was severed, and if prompt medical attention had not been sought, Troy would have bled to death. Police allege that there had been no argument between the two men, that Orchard just attacked Troy Whitfield without motive or warning. Orchard was granted bail totalling $6,000 and the matter was adjourned until November 2.
Meeting at Newcastle Workers Club, Stormont voted to follow their Sydney counterparts' decision, rejecting the Industrial Commission's return to work recommendation. The strike is over alleged employer delays of a 4% second-tier wage increase. It affects supermarket supplies of packaged and canned goods. Local supermarkets have run out of some brands and casual packing staff haven't been called this week. Managing Director of Shuey's Supermarkets, Richard Owens, says products like breakfast cereals are running low, but urges against panic buying.
It does not affect things such as milk and bread and eggs and cheese and yogurts and some of the drinks. All these items are not affected by this strike. So even though we talk that there is a strike on with the storemen and packers, it is really only the hard grocery items that are affected. It is not that fresh, those fresh products that...
Do you expect a rush of panic buys?
Not necessarily, no. No, I think the consumer is becoming used to this type of thing and they are able to pace themselves fairly well.
The matter will be heard by the Industrial Commission again tomorrow morning.